Coming up on Hurricane 2019, be prepared. Rebuilding in the Panhandle after Michael. What we found when we went back to ground zero. Recovering in the Keys. Have residents and businesses recovered nearly 2 years since Irma? And insurance issues and concerns you need to know before the next storm strikes. Now, Hurricane 2019. Be prepared.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. Hurricane season is officially here.
Over the next half hour, Rudabeh and I, along with our Chief Meteorologist Craig Setzer and the CBS 4 News team, are going to provide you with the information you need to be prepared this hurricane season. But before turning our attention to 2019, let's look back on the storm that defined the 2018 hurricane season.
Michael slammed the Florida Panhandle, the first Category 5 hurricane to make U.S. landfall since Andrew in 1992. Post-storm analysis upgraded Michael to a Cat 5 in April.
CBS 4 Chief Meteorologist Craig Setzer is here with more on that. Craig?
Many remember last October as Michael moved north up the eastern Gulf, threatening the Florida Panhandle and strengthening rapidly. At landfall, Michael was believed to have had winds of 155 miles an hour, an upper-end Category 4. But like Andrew, an extensive study of the measurements after the storm hit revealed Michael was in fact a Category 5. And while we see Category 5 storms in the ocean from time to time, there have only been 4 Category 5 storms to ever make landfall in the U.S. The so-called Labor Day storm of 1935, which ravaged the Florida Keys, Hurricane Camille, which made landfall in Mississippi in 1969, Hurricane Andrew in 1992 in South Dade, and of course, Hurricane Michael last October. Months after Michael made landfall in the Florida Panhandle, the recovery is far from complete. And for the folks there getting money to pay for it all, it's adding insult to injury. CBS 4's Ty Russell rode out Michael and went back to see firsthand how things look now.
Feet away from the Gulf of Mexico and families relaxing on the sand. There's a path of destruction. This is in the Panhandle. It's where Category 5 Hurricane Michael made landfall back in October. Sustained winds reached 160 miles an hour. There were more than 50 storm-related deaths statewide. It rocked Mexico Beach, a town of 1,200 residents. Months later, about 400 of them are trying to stay and rebuild. Many have decided to sell and leave.
We're just hanging out, and that's everybody here. It's been 7 months.
Jaques Sebastian and his wife live in a FEMA travel trailer. What's next for you?
That's the difficult part because we're having problems with contractors.
For now, the high cost of construction is keeping Sebastian parked. He's on the same property where his 3-story home once stood.
I closed on the house on 10 August, and on 10 October the storm hit, so I owned the house for 2 months.
As of late May, there was still no water or sewer for a stretch in Mexico Beach, and no gas station, grocery store, or sit-down restaurant. In a town known for its fishing and boat charters, the canal reopened at the end of April when the debris was removed. This could help with the flow of much-needed money.
To us, when we're trying to pay bills that rank in the millions, we have to be very careful what we pay. And then we have to know that on the backside that FEMA is truly going to get us back that money.
Mayor Al Cathey also owns the only hardware store in Mexico Beach. He says the debris cleanup carried a $60 million price tag, 20 times the town's yearly budget.
You got hit with a little hurricane called Michael.
In May, President Trump spoke to supporters in heavily damaged Panama City, 20 miles away from Mexico Beach.
I'm pleased to announce that my administration will be allocating $448 million in HUD disaster recovery funds for the great people of Florida.
With that, home and business owners in the Panhandle can use that federal grant money to help offset costs for repairs not covered by insurance.
I'm doing the most allowed by law to support the people of Florida.
But the grant money won't do everything that's needed. Following Michael, Democrats and Republicans have been at odds over a multi-billion-dollar disaster relief bill for states impacted by hurricanes, wildfires, and other disasters. And why is there gridlock? President Trump doesn't want more money going to Puerto Rico to help recover from Hurricane Maria. And this fight in D.C. has left the Panhandle struggling to recover faster.
We have our challenges.
Bay County Commission Chairman Philip Griffiths, who has moved homes 6 times since Michael, is frustrated over the numerous hoops and red tape to get federal help. However, he does appreciate what has been done so far.
We're going to get through this. We'll be bigger, better, and stronger at the end of it.
In May, FEMA announced it had spent nearly $700 million in emergency aid in Bay County since Michael. Most of the funds were given as low-interest loans to home and business owners.
And where are you living now?
In this 15-foot tin can trailer.
Chuck Sweat is trying to keep a smile on his face. He dipped into his savings to rebuild his home of more than 40 years in Panama City. But at times, it's tough to stay upbeat because 17 days before the storm, his wife died.
It's not hard, you know. I don't like to talk about it.
While healing and recovery continues for Sweat, he's keeping mostly everything he owns in a tent in his backyard. It's a similar struggle for many neighbors who are working to rebuild. Because of it, they've also been able to build friendships.
You know, a lot of times you don't know your neighbors. And through all this, it's like now we know each other, and we know each other very well, and we know each other's kids now, so it's really cool.
Bay County officials believe 15% of residents packed and left after the hurricane. That leaves about 182,000 people staying to rebuild. Many are living in FEMA trailer parks on a mix of public and private properties.
It almost makes it hard for me to sometimes to be like, yeah, you know, they're like, where you at? And I'll be like at the county fairground, you know, because a lot of my friends, a lot of other people didn't get to, you know, for whatever reasons, didn't get to get here.
Oh, yeah.
Lyman Wilson lives with his wife, and they have a combined 7 children. They don't know what's next, but remain hopeful.
I know help coming. I've watched the news and been on the internet and stuff, and I know help is on the way.
With another hurricane season underway, Sebastian in Mexico Beach is concerned.
I've worked all my life. It was time for me to relax. And I want to rebuild, but it seems like there's no help.
After talking to several people here in Bay County, I get the sense that they want to return to a normal life. The only issue is they don't know when or if that's even possible again. Since more than 7 months after Hurricane Michael, much of the area still looks like this. In Bay County, I'm Ty Russell, CBS 4 News.
You can see the folks in the Panhandle are very resilient and a lot of patience, and they need both of those things.
Yeah, they do. You know, we always talk about how sometimes the anxiety of the storm coming is big, sometimes getting through the storm is very big, but sometimes it's the recovery process afterward that really is the worst of a major hurricane.
And a lot of times we don't remember that they're still struggling the way they are. It's heartbreaking to see their stories. We wish them the best.
Yep.
We count on our emergency managers to be ready when a storm threatens to help us be prepared. Here's a look inside Miami-Dade's Office of Emergency Management, where they recently held their annual hurricane drill. The drill, involving employees from dozens of local and state agencies, is a simulation of a real tropical storm or hurricane event. All of them monitoring the situation and taking necessary actions, much like what they would do if they and we were actually experiencing a weather event.
One of the most important things all of us can do as we gear up for hurricane season is to know our evacuation zone. Here's an option to see if you live in an evacuation zone in Miami-Dade or Broward. Go to the Hurricane News section at cbsmiami.com. Click on Evacuation Zone Interactive Map and then enter your address and zip code.
So what is the forecast for this hurricane season? Andrea has already come and gone.
CBS 4 Chief Meteorologist Craig Setzer is back with that. Craig.
Like many years, the role of El Nino or La Nina is a critical factor in forecasting an active season. This year, El Nino is showing signs it may strengthen during the peak months of hurricane season, those being August, September, and October. That would be a good thing because warm waters in the equatorial Pacific create increased disruptive wind shear over much of the tropical Atlantic, and that shear has a tendency to reduce hurricane numbers, especially major hurricanes. Here's the Colorado State seasonal forecast numbers taking into account a moderate El Nino. The forecast is calling for 13 named named storms, 5 hurricanes, and 2 of those being major hurricanes. That compares to a normal season of 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. Keep in mind, of course, those are just numbers. The most important number to remember is the number 1. It only takes 1 hurricane, if it impacts you, to make it a season to remember.
Still ahead on Hurricane 2019. Be prepared. How far has the recovery effort come in the Keys after Hurricane Irma? See why some say not far enough. If you have a boat, you need a plan to secure it before a storm hits. Hear what one expert told us. And we have the information you need to get ready for hurricane season. Connect with CBS 4 on Facebook and Twitter, as well as cbsmiami.com. You're watching Hurricane 2019. Be prepared.
Turning now to Hurricane Irma, still impacting some of us here in South Florida, even as we look ahead to the 2-year anniversary of the storm making landfall in the Lower Keys.
Irma was a strong Category 4 when it slammed ashore back in September of 2017. CBS 4 meteorologist Dave Warren recently revisited the hardest hit area to see how far the recovery has come.
Still rebuilding in the Florida Keys nearly 2 years after Irma. The view from above is seen from Drone 4. Big Pine Key was ground zero.
Coming down the Keys, the fences were down still, so deer roaming around. There was boats everywhere, seaweed everywhere.
Residents are bonded now in a way they could have never imagined. Many remember Irma as if it was yesterday.
Oh my God, I couldn't even get to it because of the trees. There was a crew from North Carolina that came in with chainsaws and finally were able to get us from the street to the house.
Sandy Barth is among those who struggled to return after the storm to assess the damage. Things here have been cleaned, but scars remain. Like many here, they work to rebuild, but the biggest problem? Still finding and getting help.
Basically, help is almost impossible.
Sandy is not alone. Others who have been trying to rebuild find very few people to do it or the money to do it with.
I had yard space, but I needed welding done, I needed engine work done, I needed glassing done, I needed painting done, and nobody was available.
Compounding the problem is the loss of cheap housing following the storm.
I mean, if you're looking around here, all the little trailers are washed away. All those lots are selling for $250,000.
As we drove through Big Pine Key, we found empty lots and many for sale signs. Proof of all the people who just gave up and left. Irma's reach stretched up the Keys to Marathon. Fisherman's Hospital damaged beyond repair.
Recovering from Irma, like Fisherman's Hospital, destroyed by the storm, they actually had to work into the parking lot and now are in these modular structures.
A family of a different sort, pulling together with a common goal.
Very frustrating and heartbreaking, really, in a sense, because we knew how bad it was.
My concern was how would we be able to serve the community, because we knew we weren't going to be able to use the hospital.
So they made one.
And it was a MASH unit. It was a tent, and it was these sea containers that had been converted into patient rooms.
Hospital employee Laura Arbuckle continued working even though her house was destroyed. She said her hospital family made her stronger.
You don't see tears. You see everybody's happy and they're proud.
Happy and proud and still rebuilding after Irma. Dave Warren, CBS 4 News.
Florida State Senator Ana Terry Flores' district includes all of the Keys. We asked her if she's happy with the legislature's commitment to funding the Irma recovery effort.
There could have been so much more that we could have done this year. We know that there's still money that the Keys needs to be able to rebuild their emergency operations center. We have some cities that still don't have their city halls rebuilt, so there's a lot more that we could have done. But we did what we could within the financial realities that exist this year.
Senator Flores says the single biggest challenge that remains after Irma is affordable and workforce housing. She says it's a long-time problem Irma only made worse.
Hurricane recovery in Puerto Rico after Maria is ongoing and uneven. September will be 2 years since the storm made landfall there at near Category 5 strength. Some say the rebuilding effort is being hampered by President Trump, who has resisted more aid to Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico got $91 billion, and I understand they don't like me. It's the most money we've ever given to any Anybody. We've never given $91 billion to a state. We've never given. We gave to Puerto Rico $91 billion.
About $41 billion in aid has been allocated to Puerto Rico, according to the Office of Management and Budget. $91 billion, the number Mr. Trump cites, is the budget office's estimate of how much Puerto Rico could receive over the next 2 decades.
Hurricanes a lot weaker than Maria can destroy a boat that's not properly secured. You can't completely storm-proof your boat, but there are things you can do to reduce the risk to it. Here's what John Michael Cornell, the general manager of the Hurricane Cove Marina and Boatyard, told me.
The first thing I would recommend any boater doing is they need to talk with their dockmaster or marina manager as far as what their plan is. And then from there, they also need to have a personal plan, a checklist of what they need to do. Additional dock lines are a must. I recommend, new lines, also a size larger than what they're normally using. And then from there, removing anything that can be obviously blown away. Any boater needs to make sure that their boat is operating correctly in the first place. Other things that they need to be considerate of is looking at the boats around them and making sure that their boats are tied. Know your neighbors, know who you're docking next to, have their contact information, because a boat next to you, if it's not done correctly, it can also damage your boat. So it's just kind of being mindful of who, what your surroundings are essentially.
And the #1 rule, never stay on your boat during a hurricane.
I'm CBS 4 meteorologist Jennifer Correa. If you have to evacuate, you may need to make arrangements for your pets. Most important, do not leave them alone. If you're heading to a pet-friendly shelter, your pets must be pre-registered. Also, make sure your pet's collar has an ID tag, that they have been microchipped, and that all of their prescriptions have been filled. And if you will need evacuation assistance or specialized transportation to evacuate, you must also pre-register for that. Visit cbsmiami.com for a link to the forms you have to fill out, or call 311 for more information.
As we prepare for a storm, we have more ways than ever to get hurricane information, including on our social media platforms.
CBS 4 meteorologist Lisette Gonzalez takes a closer look at how the folks at the National Hurricane Center are increasingly incorporating the social media world in their storm forecasting.
We've been active on Twitter, on Facebook.
Hurricane specialist Robbie Berg is not only a meteorologist, but he also has a degree in communications.
How do people actually behave when they're given hurricane information?
And where that information comes from is being looked at more closely than ever.
We'll be doing a lot of Facebook Live interviews in real time during these past few hurricane seasons. We've gotten really good feedback on that.
They're using that feedback to predict people's behaviors.
How do people behave when the hurricane forecast changes over time? Go back and look at IRMA, where it went from the east coast of Florida to the west coast of Florida, and how did people take that information in? Did they freak out when it changed, or were they understanding that that forecast was going to change all along?
Knowing the answers to questions like that can benefit us all.
That'll help us go forward and find new ways to share information on Twitter, for example, or new things we can show on Facebook. We're just always trying to learn new ways of doing things.
The most important point is we want people to have the most accurate information. And that's why we use Hurricane Center Forecast to inform you on our app, on social media, and on air. Lisette Gonzalez, CBS 4 News.
Still ahead on Hurricane 2019, be prepared. Insurance issues and concerns. What you need to know before the next storm. And here's important information if a storm threatens. Our CBS radio partners in Miami-Dade and Broward are 99.9 KISS Country, Power 96.5, and 560 WQAM Sports Radio. Our radio partners in the Keys include US 1 Radio. And if a hurricane warning is issued for us, South Florida PBS WPBT2 will broadcast CBS 4 and MyTV33 storm coverage with on-screen captioning at all times. This is Hurricane 2019. Be prepared.
Welcome back. Insurance is a necessity, but something we hope we never have to use. For anyone who lives in Hurricane Alley, hurricane insurance can be a lifesaver.
Now is the time to address any insurance concerns you might have. CBS 4's Ted Scouten has 4 questions we should all be asking our insurance agent.
It wasn't until after Hurricane Michael hit the Panhandle that many people realized they did not have enough insurance coverage. What an awful time to find out.
In Christ, the insurance company don't pay you enough money to rebuild it. You know, you've got to scratch real hard in your savings in order to survive.
You should be able to use your phone and walk around your house and start videotaping some of the items.
Now is the time to take inventory, see what you have, and find out if you have adequate coverage for your contents and the building. You should also check your deductible. A hurricane claim is very different than other claims.
For example, if your home is a $300,000 home and you have a 2% hurricane deductible, that deductible could be $6,000.
Do you have flood insurance? So if there's rising water outside and comes into your home, that's a flood policy?
That you definitely need a flood policy for that. That is not covered in your homeowner's policy.
And did you know if your car is damaged during a storm while it's in the garage, your homeowner's policy does not cover it? So if my car is paid off and I just have liability, trying to save some money, my car's parked in the garage, and the garage comes down on my car, what happens?
You're still going to need to have comprehensive insurance coverage. Your car is a different item. It will not be covered under your homeowner's policy.
You should call your insurance agent and ask these questions. What is my deductible? Am I covered for replacement value? Am I covered for flood? And if I'm a renter, what's included in my policy? So again, now is the perfect time before there's any storm on the horizon to check with your insurance agent to make sure that you are adequately covered. Ted Scouten, CBS 4 News.
2018 was Kim Graham's first year as director of the National Hurricane Center. I talked to him recently about lessons learned as he looks to 2019.
There's been 4 Cat 5 hurricanes to hit the United States. All of them were tropical storms just 3 days prior.
Ken Graham is now entering his second year as director of the National Hurricane Center, but remains concerned about rapidly strengthening hurricanes.
You look at those Category 5s just being tropical storms 3 days prior, that means you can't anchor on one piece of information. Just because it's 3 days out and you're looking at a tropical storm, you never let your guard down. So you have to prepare just in case.
And while forecasts like the one for Hurricane Michael are getting better, Ken says you still have to pay attention during hurricane season.
Always eyes to the tropics. It's so important during the season.
But the director also cautions not to focus too much on the category.
Here's an interesting fact. Over the last 10 years, Category 1 hurricanes have produced $103 billion worth of damage and killed 175 people. It is not about that category. It's so critical everybody listens to those impacts.
And one last piece of advice on the upcoming hurricane season.
I always tell everybody this. It's a little bit of a cop-out here, but it's real. Look, if there's one storm on Earth, if it impacts Florida, then it's a busy season. So we prepare as if we're going to be hit.
And Ken and all the folks at the National Hurricane Center live right here with their families in South Florida. So they take the hurricane threat as seriously as we all should.
I'm CBS 4 meteorologist Jennifer Correa. If the power goes out, a portable home generator after a hurricane can be invaluable, but it can also be dangerous. Here's what you need to know if you have to use one. Run your generator at least 10 feet from your home. Never use it in an enclosed patio, garage, or under an eave. And use recommended extension cords. Store the gasoline for it safely. Use a fuel stabilizer and have a working carbon monoxide detector. If you have a generator, now would be a good time to check and make sure it works. For more information, go to our website, cbsmiami.com.
We'll be right back.
As we go to break, here is the list of this season's storm names. That's going to do it for Hurricane 2019. Be prepared.
Thank you for joining us. And Craig, you have some closing thoughts to share.
That's right. Every year I think long and hard about a message that will stick, that you can use to be better prepared for a hurricane. So my final thought tonight is, if you have gone through a hurricane, think of the things that you did that worked and the things that didn't, and try to improve on those things this season. And if you have never experienced a hurricane, you should find someone who has and have them share their knowledge with you. Guaranteed it will help you be better prepared.